My name is Chu Eben, and I'm actually from southern Cameroon. And I came to Germany in '98 as an asylum seeker. And during the multi-party democracy periods in Cameroon in the '90s, I finished my university as a law student. And I was very active politically, and there was a lot of turmoil, so I decided to leave Cameroon and to come over to Germany. I found out, and the other refugees, what we found out was the very difficult political situation to live in the country. But also socially, it was very difficult in terms of the law and also in terms of the civil society. As a refugee in Germany or as an asylum seeker in Germany, you are not allowed to go to school, you are not allowed to work. You are very limited in your movement. You are in an area called one crisis, which is like a district. You have food vouchers, and so you are authorized to go to specific shops and to buy specific things. The problem with all of this is that it takes a very long time, or it might not even come that you have your asylum granted, which means that some of us, like me, I spent 7 years in the refugee camp in Germany. And means in the 7 years, almost all of your basic human rights is suspended. As I said, you are not allowed to go to school. So it was a shock for us to find out that in a developed world, you couldn't go to school, or you couldn't have, access to basic information, because most of these camps are very isolated. And I tell you, 95% of the people who apply for asylum are in the end rejected. It means it's just about 1% sometimes, or 2%, that are granted asylum or the refugee statute. When we found this, we started a political movement, a group. It was called the Refugees Emancipation, first of all, Flushing's Initiative. Flushing's means Refugee Group of Brandenburg. And we went to seminars, we went to universities, we went around explaining to the German civil society about we didn't know this is happening, that people are not allowed to go out of their land crisis, or there is a law, it's called residence law of restrictions of movement. And we were very disturbed. Not only that, we were very limited in terms of the information we get about the German civil society, but that a lot of us could not find a positive outlet. So I and some other refugees, with some students from the Technical University in Berlin and the Freie University of Berlin, we decided to form a kind of a structure called Refugees Emancipation. But the idea was to find alternative ways with the German civil society on how you could empower refugees. And one of the most basic things we could do is create platforms for alternative education. And how could we go to these isolated places and create these kinds of platforms, specifically in these refugee camps, where people could then meet with the German civil society on a mental level, exchange of knowledge, information. And that's how we came with the idea of creating internet in these homes. But before we could do that, there's a lot of restrictions in Germany on how you can access to this camp or go to these camps. So we ourselves, as the victims or the people who are living in the camps, I had to make some research and discover that there was a place in Berlin at that time, in '98, that could give us computer classes. So it was in Grünbecker Strasse in Berlin, and I went there, and I decided the told me it's open. Of course, I could come and learn, and I chose sort of 5 refugees, and we were 5 of us, and we did the computer classes. The idea was to go back to these camps, create these centers, and then become as multiplicators, which we did. So with students from the Potsdam University, Technical University, we had to write to the government some kind of a resume on what exactly we want to do with this internet cafes. And there was under the order, which is called Foreigners Office, because they own the refugees. They accepted. We said, well, we were not going to create terrorists or things like that. It was just for people to access information. And they said, okay, it's okay, you can do it. So we went to this camp, and we set the first internet cafe organized by refugees themselves. And of course, it quickly spread to other places, Luckenwald, Prenzlau, Berlin, and today we have something about 20 or so of these places where we have a lot of alternative schooling for refugees. As I said, refugees are not allowed. They are not allowed to go to school. I mean, they are not supposed to do go to university. You can go to, the kids can go to classes up to 16 years, but after which you are not allowed to continue. So we opened this place, and we work with the Ali Solomon Fachhochschule, which is in Berlin, and also with the Potsdam University. And some general students come there to do their practicums, which is, and yes, my discussion here was more on trying to explain to you the difficulties of refugees in Germany and how it is possible for you, I didn't specifically know which background you people were really coming from, but to see how civil society could help refugees in trying to support them to develop such platforms, to help themselves, to educate themselves, to empower themselves, and to become more active in the country that they live in. In Brandenburg, where I have lived for the past 15 years, Brandenburg is a state which surrounds Berlin. It was really particularly very difficult for me, or for us as Africans, again, as one of my friends put it, being a refugee in Brandenburg and being an African is like being a Jew and a homosexual in the 30s in Germany. Which means that not only that you have a lot of difficulties in terms of the laws, you have a lot of difficulties in terms of relating to the civil society. And so it was very difficult for us, or it is very difficult for us, to actually develop alternative means to empower ourselves. But with this, creating these internet centers has opened a lot of doors for us. I mean, not in the classical sense, but today we have a lot of refugees who have passed through these internet cafes who are almost like journalists. They do they work with some newspapers. We have refugees today who are professional computer specialists. You know, they work with some companies today. So it has opened us a lot of doors. We have also we've gained some how can I call it, equality, that we have been able to raise ourselves in a certain level within the society. Because we have, as I said, we have a kind of cooperation with the universities today, with the Ali Solomon University and also the University of Potsdam, where they send students to come and do their practicums. I think these are all ways in which we have tried to develop ourselves independently. And We do a lot of stuff. We work with also with, and one of the most difficulties we have here is the language problem. We have a lot of language issue here, and by developing this concept that we can bring solutions from our perspective, we worked within our spaces. We've also opened it to help a lot of African and also migrant children, to whereby university students can come to our computer locations and give and help the migrant children for their homeworks, or maybe to improve them in terms of their language skills. So you might look at it as, you know, being easy, but I can bet you that to move into this level where we were able to create these centers within the asylum camps, to really develop this network with civil society in coming to these so-called isolated places, because the tendency is always to pull us to the center, you know, to explain our problems. But to develop the alternative way, the opposite way of pulling the civil society to these places has been a tough and very difficult path for us. But what we have succeeded in doing is to create a little light that if you give people the opportunities, they are able to do a lot of things, and they can start solving their problems by themselves before looking at the government or whosoever to come and help them. So, Refugees Emancipation or Empowerment is a self-organized refugee group. As I said, it came from our own experience living in this country, and because of the laws which did not allow us to go to school or to live like any other German within the civil society, we decided to create a platform within these isolated places whereby we could invite the civil society to come to these places and transfer us knowledge that we need to participate in the German civil society. Thank you.